Good morning and welcome to another segment of Market Overdrive. I'm your host, Carla Mina with Coldwell Banker Residential Broker. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Carla. This is Javier Garcia with the Federal Savings Bank, NMLS 217343. It is Monday, Wednesday, May 24th, 2017. It's actually a pretty good day. I'm actually really excited with the guest that we have in today, just because we've been discussing a lot over the course of the last couple of weeks regarding the market and inventory and everything else. So I'm very, really happy to have our guest here who's going to be discussing new construction. And with the Mario Greco Group, we have John Dazzlin.
Hey, how are you
joining
guys?
us?
Thank you for having me back. Feels good to be back. Being able to be, I think the first time was a little nervous, so hopefully this time we'll have more fun.
Why were you nervous? Come on. This is Market Overdrive.
You do it every
it's a
week.
fun show.
You do it every week. I get called once every 6-9 months.
6-9 months. What's up with that, Javi? You're going to
I
up
said
your
today was
invitations.
Monday, so don't even worry
Yeah.
about it, all right? Don't be nervous at all.
No, not this time. I
Hey,
think I'll
nothing to
fine.
be nervous about, especially when you're walking in the studio with the manila folder.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with a manila phone.
What's in the manila folder?
Sometimes you got to do things old school. You got to take a contract to the client's hand and have them look at it and sign it. If they've owned a building for 40-some years, you got to respect that and
That's
do
service.
as they wish. Exactly.
I love it. So bringing in the old with the new.
Old with the new.
That's
exactly.
what our topic is all about
I'll
today.
scan it and send it back to the other agent, though. I won't.
Are you going to walk it into the other agent?
Yeah.
Shout out
anyone
to
have a
all our
fax machine
paperless
in the
agents who
room?
are out there talking about like go technology, go paperless, and here you are. But I love it. Old, what is it? Get out with the old and in with the new.
Correct.
Yeah.
Segue to our topic this morning, new construction, how to transact in the world of new construction. I know we're always talking about there's no inventory.
Right.
So here is John in fresh from the Mario Greco Group, as Javi said, to walk us through this process. So what's happening in that market?
I mean, with the inventory, resale inventory is probably, is at a historical low. We have, when we started off the year in January, we kind of felt like it was going to be one of those years where it felt really low inventory, like a 2013. And, a couple months later, we get news that this was the lowest inventory in February in almost a decade. So it's almost like, us agents, mortgage brokers, what the market kind of feels like. You don't need somebody to give you an analysis and says, hey, these are the numbers. You sense that. You feel it.
Right.
So it is tough out there. I mean, I'm mostly on the list side, so obviously reap those benefits. But as a buyer's agent, I obviously represent buyers, especially new construction. I have several deals under contract right now for that, and it is tough. The inventory in new construction, like single-family home, there is a good amount of inventory out there. Roscoe Villages of the world, the North Centers of the world. There was a report that came out on cranes that Lincoln Park properties over $2 million that are just sitting much longer than the usual market time. I have a couple developers that are kind of shying away from building single families in Roscoe Village and North Center area, but give them a 2-3 unit condo building or 6-unit condo building, especially like throughout Westtown, Wicker Park, Bucktown, Ukrainian Village, they'll jump on it immediately. So there's just not enough land going around, if that makes sense.
Right.
And the reason why I say that is there is, but sellers are now saying, okay, well, I want X. My neighbor got $645, for example, the one on Hamilton. The neighbor next door is like, I want $699. Well, like, how are you going to get that if the prices haven't gone up?
Right.
I mean, inventory is low.
You have
forever.
to have justification for that
Exactly.
market moving forward.
So that's why there's not enough new construction inventory overall, and then also a lot of builders throughout the downtown area, River North, Streeterville, they're building apartment buildings. They're not going towards the luxury condo market because I don't think it's feasible for them, economical, to build $300,000-$400,000 condos anymore. They're going, if you notice, it's all like in a 9 West Loop. I mean, hell, there's $3 million condos being built.
Yeah.
And it's all residential rentals. I think that's more of a question for our lender in the studio to talk about why is there a lack of inventory for new construction? Is it just lending restrictions, or is it the availability of funding, or just restrictions with respect to
I would
new
say
construction?
there's a couple of things, restrictions in regards to construction, especially in the city. Specifically in the city, you have a lot of different zoning permits and stuff like that will give you limitations as to what you can or cannot build. For me as a lender, I get to see a little bit of a bigger marketplace. I kind of see a little bit outside the city limits. Like I was looking at some stats, but like in DuPage, King County, Will County, there's a lot of new construction that's happening out there. D.R. Horton actually started doing a lot of new construction here in Illinois. So I think a lot of that new construction for single-family residences is being more done in the suburban landscape. Whereas here in the city, I think you're looking at more of rehab, kind of, I want to say, almost quasi-new construction, because at the end of the day, you're seeing like these 2 flats or 3 flats that are being converted into single families. And you're seeing that significantly more. But I also would like to say is that the Chicago marketplace as well, too, for the new construction, if you're looking at the average price point, you're probably looking at a little bit north of 600 to 700,000 on a lot of the new construction in Chicago. So also the people the buyers that are going to be able to buy that kind of new construction are also a little bit more limited.
I mean,
I agree. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so
Go
no,
ahead,
some of
John.
the things was like, for example, with the rehabs, for example, I started off in the industry because of rehabs. That's I had a niche for it. I wanted to do it, and then eventually I said, why don't I get my own license? And then I just grew into representing clients, and especially developer type clients who do rehabs, whether if it's in a high rise or single family home in like a Dunning Square. A good example there is, you buy a bungalow for $200,000, but it wouldn't be feasible or economical for that developer to knock that down and build new because there's not a market for a $600,000 house. In Portage
Correct.
Park, it just started happening. Out there, rehab is not because a developer is, not willing to build new. It's just there's not a market for it. So, I know, Carly, you represent a lot of rehabbers and stuff like that. So it depends on the market. So there, they'll buy a bungalow for $200,000, put about $75,000 to $95,000, and resell it for $375,000. But there's a market for those turnkey ready properties because, like a lot of FHA, VA buyers within that price point.
Right.
So they need something that's turnkey. They might not have the capital for not only for improvements, but let alone a down payment. So that's why I think you've seen a resurgence of that. And then now, as an agent who's representing developers, I'm having a difficult time finding them deals because I can't find anything under 200.
Right. So here's the dynamics, right, that we're talking about. And when you're speaking about the Dunning areas, the Portage Park, those are the north side neighborhoods in Chicago. Obviously, we have a national audience, so we kind of have to make that interpretation or just kind of wash it down. But it is, in fact, that we don't have the as-is inventory. You're talking about new construction versus flipping. Those are two markets. But I think overall, the new construction, we're not seeing lenders lend money because the average price per square foot. So if you're looking at the downtown area here in Chicago, that's specifically what you're talking about is that average price in order for a lender to be able to justify the value and to issue that loan for that developer. So if you're a developer and you're wondering, where is my inventory? I mean, this is what's happening. We can't find you something because we don't have that value for you to find that land. The cost is extremely expensive, and lenders are making it very difficult, right? The guidelines are for appraisal value.
When you're going over the conforming loan limits, that's when you start going into a little bit of a tricky territory because you're going into jumbo lending side.
But I'm talking about more like when an investor is trying to acquire the original investment so they can go ahead and build new.
No, I think there's a lot of new construction lending that's happening today. I think that there's actually loosened up restrictions in regards to the actual new construction lending. I just think that people are a little bit less restrictive in wanting to take on that liability themselves. Like a lot of these builders a lot of times do a lot of like LLC and stuff like that when they're doing a lot of this construction is because they want a little bit of the limitations in regards to how much they're actually going to have exposure in regards to that specific investment. So that's where it kind of partakes a little bit more. But I see that a lot of the new construction that's being done is by a lot of these bigger developers, a lot of the smaller mom and pop shops. They're really catering to more specific boutique type of new construction.
Right.
They're having agents who are connecting them with the buyers, and then they're out looking for sites, and then they're actually going ahead and getting an architect and everybody to do everything else. That's more of a custom build compared to when you're dealing with like a cookie cutter, mom builder.
Right, like we used to see like a big, high rises or even two flats that were being converted into condos and people were separating pins in order to get that done. We're not seeing a lot of that, right?
Well, just because there's the rentals are more attractive for the investors now. Because developers and investors sometimes they go hand in hand. Like they'll play investor when it's the time is right to be an investor, meaning getting apartment buildings, and then they'll be the developer when it's time comes to flip it. We're seeing more deconversions from condo buildings back to rental buildings.
Really?
All throughout Streeterville. There's a couple of them that went on DeWitt right now that I know right on DeWitt and Chestnut that turned over from being and then there's one right now in Old Town that they're talking about on Lincoln Parkway.
Okay.
So there's that deconversion of it. You would think like, hey, what's going on? Wires and developers, because there's, like you said earlier, the value's not there for them to buy up those units, rehab them, and then get them sold out as condos. There's just not the value's not there because rental prices are so high.
Right. Everybody's trying to keep those as a residential rental.
Exactly.
And I guess the trend is for us to continue this trend, right? 2017, just keep the rental. And then eventually these luxury condos that are being rented out in the luxury rental market are going to be transformed into residential sales. So that's something to look out for. You're listening to Market Overdrive. We're here every Wednesday, and we want to go ahead and encourage you to share and subscribe to our YouTube page as well as our website, which is www.marketoverdrive.com. We are here to elevate your real estate IQ. With us today is is John with the Mario Greco Group, coming to share his insights on new construction. So you've heard it from the best. He's in the trenches, transacting every day. You're representing new construction. Since you have the scoop, and I know that as a buyer, a lot of people just make that assumption that it's when you're buying, it's business as usual. I know that there's some differences when it comes to contracts. Can you navigate us, help us navigate through that process?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, for example, our developer deal that we're doing right now, he has his own contract. I mean, especially when you're in the pre-construction stage. For example, so if you're in the pre-construction stage, like, for example, property that we have under contract, we're literally in the drywall phase. And the buyer wanted to come in from Pittsburgh, said, I want to be able to have a say in all the different allowances and different items that you're going to pick. So then we would use the developer's own contract that his attorney drew up. And then, but again, on the flip side, if the property was already finished, then we could use a multi-board or a car contract. Wouldn't be an issue because everything's already there. They see it, and it's done. So that's one big difference with new construction. And then you definitely want a good attorney who experience in new construction purchases, covering on the purchase side, because you want them to look through that language.
Right. No, because there's a lot of like non-refundables and stuff like that. Like I see that a lot in the purchase contracts when I'm receiving them. Like obviously there's almost like an additional 20 to 30 pages a lot of the times when you're dealing with a builder contract.
Definitely.
But I think what's very important, where I sometimes see that sometimes where someone is not really told exactly the differences in regards to the different kinds of deposits or different upgrades that they're doing with the homes. A lot of those are non-refundable, so it's very important to go over that in detail.
For example, on that developer's contract, there'll be a writer, or a spec sheet that the developer will provide, and it'll say the allowances are $7,000 for countertops. You say, great. Well, I want quartzite instead of quartz. That's going to cost you $10,000. So what are you going to do? That extra $3,000, you need to write a check for that as a buyer to cover for that. Most developers are going to want that up front because he's going to put that quartzite in. If you fall through, can't get your loan, he's not going to cough up the extra $3,000 for you. So he's now got to sell this property with a quartzite, and then he needs to come be whole on that. So that's one part of in terms of hey, the differences. The non-refundable parts. For example, there's different stages. After X stage of the construction process, you need to put another deposit down. My clients in Downers Grove right now, we did one deposit as an initial earnest money. Just got an email from the agent saying, hey, we're done with X phase per the contract. We need the additional $20,000. And an X portion of the total earnest money is non-refundable if they don't go through with the purchase. Meaning on their end.
What, you'll take my money?
Yeah. I mean, the developer's going to. But it's more so. But see, you could negotiate that as well. Everything. I mean, just like anything else, from the closing day to the doorknobs, or everything's negotiable, right? But the part of the
I don't know though, but you're saying that you have to do a
non-refundable. Construction. It's like Burger King, have it your way. But you want on.
You're like saying everything's negotiable, yet you're telling me it's not negotiable because I have to like.
No, you could negotiate the percentage of that total earnest money being non or refundable or non-refundable. For example, if you're going to go, the developer's thinking put in white shaker cabinets like every other developer, but you want these.
Isn't that like a standard at this time? I mean, like, is that really an upgrade nowadays?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
No, that's what I was getting at. Because so they have the white shaker cabinet is what the developer's thinking, and you come in as a buyer saying, I want these red polished, modern, Euro style overhead cabinets, and then he's gonna be like, okay, that's gonna be tough for me to sell if you don't.
If you don't come
through. Oh, okay, yes. So as soon as you start customizing, right? Because you do have the ability to do that. But of course, that's above and beyond the original price point.
Exactly.
So you're putting more money down. You're putting more non-refundable money down as earnest deposit.
Right.
And you're also spending more money on that contract for customizing.
Exactly. Every developer plays it differently. Some are going to want that money, up front, or like I said, they want you to pay the vendor directly, or they might say, well, we're just now going to have to increase the earnest money that puts in. If there's delays, you want to do change in the layout. The bigger thing is that as a buyer, I always, like when I'm trying to sell new construction, I actually urge the buyer in front of their agent and say, look, why don't you come back a second time just to note every little change you like to make here? Because first time you want to like it, you like the layout. Second time, like write down, because that way it's already negotiated up front. There's not that much, because then you're at the mercy of the developer to say, hey, I want this, and they're like, oh, that's an extra 10 grand, and you're like, is it really extra 10, or is he putting some on top of that for his inconvenience? So those are the tough spots. You want to get, as a buyer, write as much of that up front as possible. Try to make as very little earnest money go hard if you don't follow through after a certain date. And then some of those implications could be, yes, you could lose their earnest money. You could be forced to move forward without something that you might not want to. Now, it's not all crazy, scary, and like how might think it is.
Well, it's
fun.
overwhelming, right? Because
It is.
imagine
Oh
the
my God,
average
yeah.
consumer. We don't do this every day. So, I mean, even for me, I'm like in 3 rehabs right now and I'm about to lose my mind. Like, I seriously can't. I'm like, every day it's so stressful because you have to choose like vanities, toilets, you know, and like sinks and then, you know,
That's
like
actually
carware.
the stressful
It's like
part with
the
most
most
of the
stressful
buyers.
part.
It is.
Because they get a limited time of like when they have to tell the builder that this stuff has to be
I
in. Like
have some developers that won't even take pictures until it's done. Like, let alone market it. No pictures, because they don't want to be the custom builder for a buyer. They want to build what they had in mind and say, okay, do you want, I could change the paint color maybe, you know, or the floor stain, but that's about it.
Right. But for the most part, you guys have like a set standard of what you're going to do and how the
course.
property is going to
Yeah,
look. So the buyer can go in there and choose colors. Maybe you have 3 variations of tiles.
Yes.
Maybe you have 3 variations of
Exactly.
cabinets. So it becomes standard. So you're not going to get overwhelmed with the whole process. Now, going back to your contract where you said that, you know, we have to set a timeline for the buyer. Is there a timeline for the developer? And if the developer goes above that timeline, what are the ramifications for that developer?
We have a lot of times we've negotiated for clients. For example, this particular development, we have told them that it's going to. So you know, it's kind of hard depending on which hat you put on. You know, as a listing agent, I'm trying to protect the developer, saying, look, we're expecting to delivery by October, or to be determined. You know, like meaning there's still some wiggle room there in case something's not ready because the city permit process, whatever it might be. For the buyer's sake, we have negotiated where if it goes beyond that time frame that we said we're going to close on this on September X, and if it goes into October, well, then that buyer's going to get compensated for it.
Right.
Whether if it's through, let's say at the end of the day he owed a developer $2,000 for the extras, well, they're going to chop away at X per day because the developer did not, you know, deliver
I've
on
had
time.
developers who've paid for rate lock extensions.
Exactly.
You know, just
That is
because of
that's the
weather
most normal
inclinations
one.
or things like that.
Exactly.
Where it's like, hey, you know what? We were expecting to close on the 30th of the month. Now we're going into the 15th of the following month. It's going to require an extension. I've had builders without a problem say, we'll cover the extension and, you know,
course.
no problem.
Especially if they got a good contract in hand and they want to do whole by them. A lot of the developers that we work with, they're not, you know, one and done.
Right.
These are people that have been built through the recession and still.
And that's one key thing that I think that we should definitely, you know, talk about is those developers, right? Because we, you know, I like to say we have amnesia. We forgot about the market crash and everybody
course.
not being found. I mean, at the beginning of, towards the beginning of the recession, when the market crashed, I remember we were representing this 20-unit building on Belmont, and we were spending so much money on marketing. We were going to do this huge open house, and then it was in Roscoe Village, and we were going to have like, you know, just invest all this money on this open house, and there was like a block party, and we put in so much money, and then I remember getting a call the next Monday after that weekend open house and all the money we spent on marketing. The developer called and said, we're filing bankruptcy because we're not going to be able to. And I'm talking about $740,000 2-bedroom units. You know, that's what they were selling for. And that was the standard, right? And then we have like more for upgrades. Right. But the market just sick, right? And all of a sudden, everybody lost money. Lenders weren't giving money for new construction projects. We couldn't sell a thing. Right. So where did these developers go? And now do buyers have that concern that, you know, what happened? Where these developers are coming from?
100%.
Are they legitimate? Are they going to run away with my money? Am I going to, you know, lose touch with them after this is done?
No, for sure. I mean, the first question for a buyer, if your agent's not asking for you, you as a buyer should ask, what previous projects have they done? This meaning the developer. Can I get a list of it? We put that list in our our packet, our marketing material, but ask, why is it that, you know, this particular developer has only built 2 houses in the last 5 years? You know, I mean, not that that means that any bad red flags or anything, but, you know, something to definitely bring
there's
up.
custom builders. I mean, we work with custom builders as well, but they all have a reputation. Right. So going to that, John, how can someone research that aside from like the realtor that may tell you what you want to hear?
I mean, besides the normal, you know, search engines and then checking with the city how many permits they've, you know,
they file with the
city
for
some of their past projects. Look on the MLS, those units that they've sold, which agents represented the buyer. I've actually told that on one of our developments, a 4-unit building in Ukrainian Village. I'm like, look, why don't you look up this address? There's about 6 units that they sold there. They have 12 more coming up. Look at the buyer's agents. They're reputable agents. Give them a call and say, hey, how did your buyer like? How do they like their unit? How was the process dealing with this developer?
Yeah.
You know, that's an extra step that you could take, because I think from one agent to another, like if Carla called and asked me, I'm going to tell her up front. I'm like, hey, you know what? We didn't have the best experience. And I've had that.
Right.
You know, I won't obviously give a name right now, but, and then, you know, vice versa. If I said, Carla, hey, I saw that you were the buyer's agent for X development on Belmont. What did you think of them? Are they good? Are they reputable? Did they come out in that 1-year warranty to check on things?
Right.
You know, that's another big aspect of
Right.
it. Within that developer's contract is the warranty language.
And you guys are doing a 2-year warranty or a
1 year warranty.
1 year
But
warranty
that's-
on everything.
Yeah, 1 year warranty. The only thing, every developer has their own
Right.
one has wear and tear language defined differently than another. That's why I say, please, please, please.
So I can't have the kids hanging from the doors, the cabinet
Yeah,
doors, and then call the developer like your
Oh,
cabinet
we put
is
the
not.
swing set on the door.
That's
on the door
beyond
set
wear and
there.
tear.
Just kidding.
But that's why
I wouldn't do that.
That's what's so important, to make sure that you have a real estate attorney who has done new construction on the buy side represent, because they
I
know what to,
completely agree.
they
I think
know
that's the
what to
number one
look
key.
for. They know
Yeah.
what to look for, and then obviously a lender like Javier himself who know how the loan process is going to work. For example, clients who bought a property that just broke ground, they're not going to close for 6 months, so you know how to navigate when
Exactly.
to lock the rate, all those things. So again, another professional to help you along the way, and then obviously your agent is going to be the one that's kind of make sure that everything else is moving along.
Yeah, because
or
it's
process.
important. Because even like for a client who might be taking government financing, like I'm taking a look at a lot of the suburban new construction, it's right around 300 to 360,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Is the average price point. So when you're looking at FHA or VA financing, we also have to make sure that the builder who's actually doing the build is also FHA or VA approved. A lot
point.
of people don't, kind of leave that. It's sometimes as a last second type of thing. We're like, we're not even sure if the builder is FHA or VA approved. And then we as a lender have to verify that. We get a copy of the 1 year warranty. We also make sure a lot of the times we do subterranean and termites inspections and stuff like that as well too. So we always do our due diligence to make sure that at the end of the day, the consumer, the buyer, is always getting the best possible, transaction on the table.
That's great. And, we always say that on the show. It's like, align yourself with the experts, find somebody. And Javi, you're always saying, like, work with an agent that's specialized in a specific area, work with an agent that knows, how to work that market. I think that this is, like, for sure the one case that I would recommend somebody to work with an agent that focuses and understands a contract for new construction. Because if you miss the part, from a buyer's perspective, and you are stuck in a contract and then you have to pay a per diem, I mean, the per diems can get pretty hefty.
Right.
We're talking about like $150 a day just for you not getting your deal done because your lender is not ready to give a clear to close.
Because it also depends on the sales center rep as well too. Like one of the things that I learned, a little shout out to Basil Malouf with Palmer House Properties out in Atlanta, who sends me a lot of the new construction business that I actually do. A lot of the times you get different incentives for using their in-house lender, and sometimes you could receive a higher incentive for upgrades.
Right.
And he's the one who kind of helped me navigate to like, hey, whenever we're dealing with a buyer, we're always going to go with the incentives for the upgrades because we always feel that the financing is always going to be competitive with you or with the in-house lender regardless. So there's a lot of different variances when you're structuring it, where if you're not working with someone who knows how to work new construction, you might take a deal that is not the best possible deal on the table. Right. Just because they don't know any better. But if you're dealing with someone who's doing it multiple times and knows exactly which way to use those incentives for the best leverage of the buyer,
yeah,
you're going to get yourself the best possible contract and financing at the same time.
Right. I mean, it depends on, like you said, if you have the in-house lender who's offering a great rate or closing cost credits. But then a lot of times you got to kind of sometimes look past that because you always ask yourself, how long are you planning on being on the property? Is the rate really the most important thing? Is the closing cost more? Or would you rather be more happy if we took some of that money and used it towards finishes? Would you want a mudroom set up with cubbies and storage lockers and stuff like that?
Look at you negotiating already.
No,
I want it all. I want all of that. I want all my cool finishes, and I also want my closing costs.
Well, again, those are all things that depending on the builder. For example, if it's a bigger development, like you go out to the suburbs where they're literally building a subdivision, of course, there's going to be a lot more leeway on that. But if you have that one builder who's building a single-family home, and it's just one property, and he's already on a certain budget, so that's where you get creative. You reach out to the lenders to help out with, whether if it's the signage, the marketing, the incentives that you could provide to that buyer, and at the same time, you go out to your developer and say, hey, what could we do to offer that incentive? It's not just, hey, give the co-oping agent an extra 0.5%. No, that doesn't get it done. But what could we do to bring that traffic over? And then a lot of times you need to ask yourself as a buyer, what is more important for you? What makes your bottom line better? Not what's better for the lender, the agent, or the developer. What do you want out of this deal? Do you plan on, if it's a condo, it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, do you really plan on being there more than a couple of years?
Right.
So do you want to
always with the
overspend
long-term
and
goal.
over upgrade?
Exactly.
Yeah, because obviously it's just entry. I like to point out that you talked about the in-house lender for that developer when you walk into these, new construction developments. There's also an in-house realtor, and you don't necessarily have to work directly with that realtor. You can always find representation. If in the case of a buyer, if you're walking in, you can always seek to get your own personal realtor that's going to represent you to their, your best interest. us. But I found it so many times that are like, well, the developer's realtor told me that I could do this and I can do that, and I should have asked for more and I should have asked for this. And you know what? I didn't even do a home inspection because I knew it was brand new. What could be wrong with a brand new property?
Always get a home inspection.
Oh my
I don't
God.
care.
Right.
Oh my God.
I don't care who the developer is.
Or it's the same case of when someone walks into
You
an
know,
open
I always
house.
kind of go to like that whole Tony Robbins thing where he's like, one time he was talking and he was kind of giving a speech. He's like, I have this multi-billion-dollar corporation that's running. He's like, I know one of my employees is screwing up right now. That's the way it is as well too with a builder, right? You know, they have employees. There's things that happen. Maybe they connect the electricity wrong, or who knows what happens. Always, always, always get a home inspection.
Yeah, and we had on a deal where the developer's like, oh, we'll do the inspection 2 days before closing. I'm like, no, we're not going to do it 2
Well,
days
you
before.
can't even do that anymore with TRID,
Yeah,
right? Guidelines.
exactly.
You have to know what exactly you're going to be negotiating
That-
way before closing.
before-
Those
and I-
days are over.
And I told my clients wanted to, they were, talking to me. They're like, when could we do it? I'm like, the ideal time to do it is when the roughs are in and the fixtures are in. Because,
Right.
okay, you go in to see a slab of concrete. What are we inspecting? And then, or there's electrical lines and plumbing lines. Again, what are we inspecting? What are we turning on? Nothing. So
That's great advice, actually,
so
John.
make sure
to
that
do multiple inspections.
you
to
should do at
it
least two.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
At least two.
One,
On new
because-
construction, definitely two.
Yeah, because you can do the one that's going to come up, and I'm literally
Oh,
going.
developers are going to hate us now.
No,
They're going to be like,
I'm
"What?
going-
I can't, who has time for that?
I'm
we
going
need
at
to
1:30
get
today for a follow-up rehab, but still, we went in the first time and there was issues. There's a leaky faucet here. This is loose. This is that. There's a structural thing we want to confirm. So we're going back today at 1:30. The developer told us everything's ready. So we're going back with the inspector to make sure that everything is ready. And we're doing it 2 weeks before the closing just because, again, I'm always thinking that there might still be a few items missing.
Right.
I don't want to have that developer rush, go call the fourth electrician on his list to come fix that versus his top guys. And that's very important. The new construction aspect of it is people buy it for the peace of mind. I've had once a buyer tell me, and I was on the list side because I was really being a little hard on the buyer because he was being an extra picky, rightfully so. But again, I have a client to protect. They have their side of it. And I was like, he's like, John, we're paying X. And I will never forget this. John, we're paying X for this house because we want it to be all done right. We're not, if I wanted issues, I would have bought the 30-year-old house down the street for X, potentially less. You know what I mean? So when you stop and think about it, you're like, man, this guy's about to spend $1.5 million. He's right. He should get everything, not only everything he wants, but also done right, professionally done well, within the timely manner that was promised to him.
Because I always like when developers are, when realtors market property, this is the developer's own property. And of course, the developer own property means that they're going to spend more money on upgrades. They're going to have like the real good tubs, the more expensive tubs. But shouldn't everything be built up to the developer's standard of what people want? I mean, like you said, they're spending this kind of money. We should have the ability to customize. And I know there's profit margins there, right?
Yeah,
but we should at least get a budget of like, okay, you can get this. But more importantly, like the mechanicals, the plumbing, when the wall is open, you want to make sure that all that is done. So I definitely recommend that inspection.
It needs to all be written down, meaning allowances. I know we keep going back on that, allowances, lender credits or anything like that, but the allowances are so important because it takes out the guessing part of it. Like right now, we're about to work on a deal that's on a drywall phase. I already emailed the agent, hey, this is the tiles we're thinking of. This is what we're thinking of. This is what we're thinking of. So if they didn't like any of those selections, then we would go back to them and say, well, we were planning on spending $4 a square foot for that tile. So let us know anything you find that's up to $4, and we'll put it. Why not?
Pay the difference.
Easier for us.
Yeah.
We take out the guessing game. But if you wanted to spend $6,000, I know we hit on this earlier. Well, then we got to talk about, and then every developer has a different tolerance of it. They might want that money up front. They might want it later. But the inspection part of it would come in shortly after, I would say, all those things are at least installed and running. So that way you have an idea of, and in new construction, very important on the inspection part, because on a resale, you might not look at the scratches on the floor. You might not look at the skirmishes on the cabinets. On new construction, everything is fair game.
Yes.
Go down there and put on blue tape. Get on your hands and knees and put the blue tape all around the grout on the tile. And I mean
He's making us work.
I mean the buyers. Go carefully, look through it,
the
because
trim sometimes is where I see a lot of the issues. Sometimes
because it settles, so you have that separation, caulkings, all those things. You should look at it. I've had a deal in Logan Square where I told my clients they're very easygoing. I'm like, guys, I see a scratch right there. This banister's loose. Let's mark these things. They're like, oh, we could do that. I'm like, yes, it's new. So that's very important. On the list side, I get annoyed, but of course, at the buy side, you're like, hey, wait a minute, no, again, back to what the gentleman said. That buyer is paying a premium for new construction.
Absolutely.
I love it. Great advice, John. And you're listening to Market Overdrive. Again, we're here every Wednesday on WGN, and we're here to elevate your real estate IQ. Today we have John with the Mara Greco Group, and we're talking about new construction. Great advice. I really love that because I think that a lot of people take that for granted, thinking, oh, I'm getting new construction, everything should be fine. But, when it gets to the point of doing a final walkthrough, you get to do your checklist and outline, what you need to do, like the little marks on the crown molding, the little marks on the door. But I'm more scared about like not putting something on a contract. I love it when, realtors say, oh, it's sold as is on all the marketing. Oh, you're going to get this. This is what you're going to get on that marketing. But if it doesn't transcend or translate in that purchase contract, you're screwed.
Oh,
right? Somebody missed something, and usually who has to
important.
pay for it is the client. So make sure you align yourself with an expert, and this is the one time that I would recommend to work with somebody that specializes in new construction, that understands how to navigate those contracts. And if you're not working with somebody who's done a deal in new construction before, definitely hire an attorney that can navigate that contract, because everything has to be in writing.
Yes.
And ask them, have they done new construction? Ask them.
The attorney, right.
Ask the attorney, have they done new
purchase side.
construction on the purchase side?
Because on the sell side, their job is just creating up the developer's contract, making sure all the legality things are done. But on the purchase side, you're dealing with the emotions of making sure everything's on there. And again, why the agent's so important. Again, going back to that larger suburban subdivision developments, that agent in there, of course, they're going to be ethical. They're going to take care of you. They're going to provide you all the information up front. But do you really think they're going to go to bat for you? Their job, they represent the developer. They're not going to mention that, if you negotiate a little bit harder, you would get X. They're not going to say that. But that's where your agent comes in to do that for you. And then on the, in terms of going back and forth on it, if you don't, you were mentioning about, in terms of you're beyond just the blemishes and stuff like that, what's on the contract, we get our developers to make sure they look through the spec sheet and then initial and sign it that is correct. So that way, when I'm representing that developer can't say, oh, wait, I didn't mean 4-inch floors. I said 3.5. I'm like, you signed saying 4. Now, when the buyer negotiates that, the buyer's going to have a writer that's going to say, I saw 4, I want 5. Right. Now, that way, that's why I really recommend to do that second or third tour to really write down everything you want in that property. There are going to be changes along the way. My boss, when he built his house, he told me how many times he had to change things because he didn't think about it. He's like, oh, wait, I would want a window in this room, an extra window or something.
Right.
Those things are going to happen, but be ready that you got to pay for that. I mean, it's not going to be for free. You know? And a lot of times buyers think that, the greedy developer, that, what's another window? Well, what's another couple $100 for you then? So.
Right. I mean, it's difficult. It's a difficult task. I mean, I'm not doing brand new construction where we're doing flips. You have to talk to the contractor. You got to get it in writing.
Tighter margins.
Yes, tighter margins,
yes.
right? Because
even tighter margins. Yep.
It's just crazy. You're like, okay, I thought you were going to charge me $42,000 for labor. Oh no, we're talking about $50,000, $80,000, and there goes that $120. Now you're $150,000 in renovation. So. Always get it in writing. If you learn anything from the show, and of course we're here to elevate your real estate IQ.
She gets it in
we're
writing.
In the trenches.
From her brother. You gotta get that.
Shut up, Javier.
That's awesome.
It's just with new construction. There's, like you said, there's a little bit more margins to work with. You're dealing with a little more of a developer who's he does a lot more wholesale, because if they build one, their odds are they're building others, so they're able to get a better deal on X products versus the rehabber. Is usually, at best, he's got a pro account at Home Depot or something like that. There's only so much that they could get in terms of a discount.
Right.
It's just a lot of times, new construction could be an awesome experience.
It's an amazing experience. I mean, the availability of being able to customize your home.
100%.
Yeah,
and
I definitely would say there's something a little bit more special about doing a new construction, because it is that customization. Like, I know that a lot of the stuff that I do in Georgia is all new construction, just because that's where the market's at over there. And I all the time get the pictures from the families. They're really happy, and it's just a lot of the times you're customizing your own kitchen, your own bathroom. A lot of the times your master bedroom and everything else. Everything is exactly the way you want it. You're not coming in and then trying to make something your own. You're making it your own.
And that's where another good agent comes in, where, also to kind of guide you to make sure there is such a thing as over-improving. There is such a thing as doing it too personal, because you want to remind your client, yes, it's your home. Enjoy the hell out of it, right? But remember, in a couple of years or 10 years, 20 years, you have to sell this thing someday.
Right.
So try to think of that. Maybe me as an agent, I think of that more often than I should. My wife gets mad at me for that. She's like, everything's resale. I use that word a little too much.
Very important. I think we use that here a lot as well. It's like always think about when you're reselling the property. If you're going to buy it at a discount, you're going to sell it at a discount.
Right.
But when it comes to over improving, I think that's very important. And I think we should move into our topic of like comping out a property and bidding more. It's like, how is the market looking in the new construction?
In the new construction, it again goes price points, right? I mean, we just sold a $5 million property that, there was obviously a lot more negotiations. There's more room for that. But if we're selling $1.5 million house, there's not as much. And then eventually when you get down to selling 4 units in Lakeview, there's even that much more limited. The property on the 3500 block of Wilton that we sold, for example, sold almost all of them at the asking price, if not a little bit over, because of some of the extra improvements they wanted. So those, like the condo market, in especially in a walk-up building, in your typical neighborhood, there is going to be not much discounts. There really isn't.
There's not a lot of negotiating room.
The luxury market, yes, but not so much in the the walk-up, $400,000 to $600,000 condo. Because if you don't buy it, there's somebody else. There's a bigger buyer pool.
There's not a lot of inventory, and obviously we know, but more specifically with the new construction, if something is brand new. So, I always tell clients, like, even if you're spending $600,000 on a property, and then you go in there, you're like, yeah, but I could have done this differently with this kitchen. I don't like where the island is. I would have had more of like that space there. It's all about customizing, but there's a premium to that.
And you got to be careful because some developers, don't like doing it, period. They'd rather sell it to the other buyer who says, I love it the way it is, and they'll take a couple of grand less and not have to deal with that headache. So, when you're seeing pricing and bidding and everything like that, it's very important. There was just an article that came out that we passed around throughout the group. When you're negotiating for, properties that have multiple offers on it, whether if it's new construction or not, it's still the same theory, is that make sure that your buyers doesn't seem too picky to that listing agent or to that seller, because then they're gonna be like, why would I go with him when I could go with them? They were so worried that the deal could fall apart at any minute. So making sure that you have your buyers, locked in, being aggressive, being very easygoing in a sense.
Flexible.
Even maybe in the beginning, at least to that perception that, hey, these guys are gonna be good to work with.
I can't go buy Zillow on my finishes?
No, not so much.
Come on.
No,
I'm paying you a premium to get new construction.
No, if you're paying a premium, definitely. I just meant when you said earlier in a multiple offer situation, you just want to make sure that, hey, what is the most important to you? Like, are you okay with this island the way it is? Because you're telling me you want this island removed and put into the living room, for example. Something crazy extreme. Of course, the developer's going to be like, okay, what's the
I just want a wet bar and an extra cabinet, and I want you to make it all quartz.
We all do.
Marble. No marble.
No, absolutely.
But, when it comes to making an offer on a new construction, just, look at the comps. Not every new construction is priced correctly. Hell, not any resale is priced correctly.
Right.
So new construction even more so. Now, there might not be as many comparables to go around.
That's exactly what we're talking about, because there isn't precedent, right? We don't have history in that market.
Right.
So if you're saying we're just building new construction now because the leniency in lending and financing for new construction has just become available, then how do we go back to comp that property out to assess value and to make sure we're not overspending in today's market?
Just like any property that you would do for like a resale, just go back to seeing at least the most recent new resale, like meaning we're in 2017, maybe there was a resale of a 2015 property. So take that and then see how the finishes compare. Well, now, if it's a mid-2000, there's going to be significant differences in the finishes, the style, everything. So as recent as possible, for example, the one that I'm going to go for the reinspection today at 130, it was listed at 585. And every comparable I could look at was no more than 550, and those were brick. This is a frame house.
Okay.
So again, even though that's a REIT, but you look at it and say, okay, I don't have an apples to apples comparison, but what you do is, like any appraiser would, you start making adjustments. So I told her, I'm like, no, we're not paying anything close to that. And she really wanted it. She's like, no, I know you want it, but I'm not going to let you pay that. So waited for the price drop, and then it went from 585 to 575. No, still no. And then it went to 550. I said, all right, now we go in, and we got it for 515, $70,000 less.
That's awesome.
Now it's not just say, oh, here's a pat in the back, but it's just because
it is a pat in the back. That's amazing.
No,
and that's exactly why people have to work with somebody that knows that market.
But
because otherwise they get emotional.
Like you said yourself earlier, so I'm looking in Portage Park, and I'm trying to narrow down the filters as much as possible. I'm looking in Portage Park. Okay, so we got the area down. Now it's a gut rehab. Okay, now I have a pool of those, the houses. Okay. Ours is frame. There's only one or two. So if I go strictly off of those, it's still not the right price because the guy went above and beyond on improvements, and our buyer's willing to pay for that. but just not going to let her be the most expensive gut rehab sale in Portage Park, you know?
Right.
So
Let's do a shout out to my friend Adam Barrera, who's also on Facebook Live. Thank you for your questions. We'll make sure that we follow up with you. And if you're listening, we are on Facebook Live Wednesdays at 10 a.m. So you're on my Carla filter and you're also on Facebook. But Adam Barrera does a lot of work at Avondale area, Portage Park, and Deming area, I believe. And they have this really cool thing called renovation tours. So they basically get exposed to property in the as-is condition, and then they'll show it. And it's like a tour bus. Everybody gets to see the existing property. And then they see like the work in progress. They'll show another property while it's in progress of being rehabbed. And then, of course, you see the beautiful home that everybody loves because it's got all the bells and whistles.
Right.
So shout outs to you for doing a great job and elevating the industry, standard. But great advice when it comes to that. Like negotiating is key because you don't want to overpay for something.
especially because
So
you're
what
already
do
going
they
to be
do? Do they come out of pocket for the difference if it doesn't appraise out?
Yeah, so last, I mean, just like anything else, I'll come in and say, okay, well, now it didn't appraise. You're like, okay, now what do we do? So do we, like, I know you just said this morning you're dealing
It's
with
like
one.
headaches
exactly.
heavy.
So, I mean,
Headaches. It's
Lender
like, so are you
headaches,
going to
like-
come with this money out of pocket, or are we going back to negotiating?
are we going
But
back
they
to
could do that, right? They can come out of
absolutely.
pocket.
Come out of
Come out of
pocket. They go
pocket.
to the developer and say, look, we're 20 grand apart. Let's go 10 times.
I would go back to developer
For
and
sure
say,
you are. First,
know,
first thing you're gonna do is
Sure
ask
you
the
would.
developer to chop the 20 off right off the top,
Right.
and improve and look at the comparables. They're gonna go to their agent and say, hey, are these comps in this appraisal, sufficient? And then if it is, then they're gonna say, well, no, 20 is not gonna work. How about we do 10-10? Now it's up to your buyer to say, look, what's $10,000 in the grand scheme of a 30-year loan? Pennies, right? So it's not the biggest end of the world. But now if you're talking about a couple $100,000 difference on a $2-3 million property, that's a big chunk of a difference that
Right.
we're off
Absolutely.
here. So either
everybody's off.
yeah, so either me as the buyer's agent didn't do a good job of negotiating for you, or there was something in the lapse that we missed as a whole. Everyone, all parties missed because the developer's shocked.
Or
the
you're
buyer-
working with the crappy lender that can't get this thing financed.
No. A lot
Excuse me,
of,
we're not the one appraising. We don't do appraisals.
no,
okay?
lenders don't do.
Or a lender that always messes
Or the-
up
or the
appraisals. I'm not
realtors
going to talk
who-
about. Seriously, there are lenders whose appraisals never come out, and I'm not even going to say names. I'm not.
you know,
'cause
I think-
I'm going to
I think a lot of
Stay
stay clean.
don't name drop anyone.
I think a lot of times what happens is with the appraisal process is that don't respect.
You don't have to clean it.
No. I respect all the appraisers out there. But
HVCC
but-
rules of conduct.
But definitely sometimes when you look at those reports and you're like, I had one where it was over a year ago. I'm like, I thought you guys look at 6 months or less. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I mean, you're sorry about that? Can we? It was for my own house, for my own refi. So I was just like, okay, but
This is personal when it's
Yeah,
because you're
Yeah,
in
when
the
it's
business.
your own house, it's
so,
personal.
I
So
can't do
just like
this.
how us as agents, our work gets checked all the time. Like, you have your other agent telling you, John, where'd you come up with that list price? That's out of whack. And you're like, well, where'd you come up with this low ball offer? Like, we're always
No, this is serious.
Right. This
Real,
happens
like
every
real
day.
estate talk. Like,
Yeah.
hey, are you serious? I'm sorry. Can you please help me navigate this because I
I've-
need to explain it to my client. Yeah, I don't want to be rude and say, where the f did you get these? comps?
Sometimes I'm a smart, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I would love.
You know, we
what?
can curse on the
For-
show, right? I want to
Uh,
encourage craziness.
Oh, okay. Oh, you don't want to tell me that.
He's gonna go
Us real estate agents don't have a
a filter. No
yeah.
filter.
But no, in all seriousness though, like low ball offer will come in and you're like, you're almost out of like shock. You're like, please tell me, where'd you come up with this number? Like, first question I ask is, did you come up with this number or did your buyer come up with this number? Are you just
And
being
if
a-
your buyer came
Right.
up with this number, why
Right.
weren't
Are
you educating?
Exactly. Are you just being a puppet for your buyer? Like you just say, hey, okay, great, I'll write $400,000 on the $600,000
like
property. But it more so than is, again, back to that multiple offer situation. Do you really want to be the one where, the one offer that really stood up because you're being really combative with the list agent, and then the list agent's gonna go back to his client and say, don't go with them. That agent's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or hey, their buyers.
Sometimes crazy works though.
It could if it's you're the only offer. But remember, we were talking about earlier about multiple offer situation. Like, no, even in new construction, you got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Hey, let me plug our previous show because we did have an extensive 1 hour show on bidding wars, and I think we talked about like building rapport with the other agent,
Yes,
so that we don't get into
definitely.
these problems. But yeah, if
I'm
you
extra
listen to that
nice.
show, go ahead and check it out. It's on our YouTube library, so you can check it out because bidding wars, it's real. It's 2017 and it's summer market. It's only going to get crazier. So yeah, build rapport with that client that agent, cooperating agent, because you want to make sure that they understand that the process. Because the worst part is just what you're saying. It's an agent doesn't understand the process and they're coming in conflicted. Like just being aggressive and talking about comps like you don't know what you're doing. You're like,
Right.
this is my 5th new development.
And it's also
I look at it as like it's an interview.
yeah.
I had a realtor. She's fairly new, and she's like, asking me for tips or whatnot. I'm like, it's honestly like an interview. you're interviewing your buyer to this potential seller and letting them know that that's the best potential buyer that they possibly have in the market.
I
I'm
think
like, so you always gotta
interviewing
put
is
your
pretty candid.
best-
I think it's qualifying, right? Because there's a lot of money at
You're
stake.
selling your buyer to that listing agent.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
in a sense, because and what I mean by that is I'll ask them right away when I know it's like even if it's not a multiple offer, but I know it will be if we don't act quickly
Yeah.
to avoid it. What is your seller looking for? A closing date.
Yep,
Next
exactly.
day. Right
That's
now,
a really good one,
we
though.
got a property right now that I was
I
texting
like
earlier.
that.
We got July 7th. We went under contract in April. You know, they were like, we want July because they haven't found something. Great, we'll do July 7th. And as is, sure, we'll do as is. You know, but those are things obviously your buyer's got to be comfortable with it. But those are questions to start asking the listing agent during the tour, because especially once you sense your buyer really likes it.
Yeah.
Like, hey, so what is your seller looking for? Hey, would a quick close work, or do you want a little bit longer? What are they looking in terms of, you know, if we went as is?
You're looking for their needs. You're
Yeah.
looking for their
So
wants and their
once
needs.
you figure those
I don't know. Are
things
you seeing a lot of S's when you construction, though?
No,
I
not
would-
new construction. Oh, no,
right,
definitely
just
wouldn't.
the normal deal.
Yeah. New
Okay.
construction, the one where we're seeing a
I
lot
would
is
no, I would be very scared.
so the reverse for that for new construction would be is a little less allowances. You know, like a little less being about, you know, what else can we get? You know, don't put in a writer just yet. Just write your offer. The most, like, you cannot live with stuff that you want to add on to that contract, and then obviously at some point during the term review. Now this is a little bit out of thing. You don't go do your inspection and come back and say, hey, I want a Sub-Zero refrigerator when they were putting Maytag. You know, you're like, hey, no, that's now your buyer's just being
Yeah.
now your buyer's being shady and trying to think. But you want to at least put the most important things up front, and then during the negotiations say, you know what, we would love if we could add A, B, and C. What would that cost?
Right.
So instead of doing it up front, then the developer just sees a long list of items. As long as you're willing to know that the odds are you're going to pay for it, but if the whatever developer's already putting in there and you're happy with it, well, then try to slim down on your requests. Just
Right.
because you just want that developer in a new construction to feel like, okay, I could make this deal work and this is going to close. You know,
Right.
And you know, for our listeners out there who are not in the business, they are probably thinking, why am I being so candid? I have the money, I have the approval, I can buy this property, and I want to customize it because I want that new construction experience. And we're saying, let's be candid, let's be nice, let's give in, but understand the marketplace that you're
Right,
shopping in, right?
exactly.
Especially
Site
if you're in that
addresses.
single
There's
family
not enough
category.
sites.
or jump on something when they broke ground.
Right.
You know, like
Pre-construction.
Yeah,
Pre-construction.
Exactly. Have your agent start. We get Mario sends us every week new permits that were just issued. Every week from throughout the city. So that way we could look and say, oh, wow, there's 4 units being built on Rockwell. My client's looking in Logan Square. So then look, odds are you probably find out who bought the land through the MLS as the buyer's agent. I actually did that for a client of mine, looked through that, and then we went, it was on Byron. I noticed it was Jeff Lowe. I was like, okay, Jeff Lowe, great. And I reached out to him. I was like, hey, you guys are
Reputable names,
yeah,
yeah.
you guys broke ground. What are you guys looking? He's like, wow, yeah, we don't even have our spec sheet ready yet, but this is what we have in mind. You know,
Right.
roughly. This gave me an address. We were able to use that and write in, and we were ahead of the curve. We got everything we wanted because the developer's like, great, I get to sell this. Tell my bank that I already have it sold before I don't have the drywall up.
Yeah.
That's
It's
when
a
you can get the
win-win for
most from it.
everybody.
It's a win-win for
It's a
everyone.
win-win for the developer, right? Because now they know
Exactly.
that for sure they're going to have a buyer at the end of their project. And
Exactly.
then the buyer gets to customize. And then more importantly, they don't get into the bidding war aspect of it.
Have your agent do their job, which
Exactly.
is not just scan through the MLS and wait for something to pop up. Be the aggressor and go out and look to see. When you're driving by, hell, when you're walking to Mariano's, be like, oh, wow, they just put up a fence. What does that mean? It's about to be torn down.
Right.
So find out what's going over there, and your buyers will love you for it. They will be so loyal to beyond that because they were like, John found this for us before it was even on the market. Everybody loves to say that. I got this house
Absolutely.
and nobody had access
Everybody
to it.
does, right?
I had exclusive entry to
Yeah.
it. And why not? And then so... But again, once the developer is pretty much done with the house, 95% done, there's significant drop in their appetite to change things up for you.
I like that.
There really is. And because they're like, if he doesn't buy it, somebody else is. And if it's a multiple offer situation, good luck.
Yeah,
unless
there's no
you're
way.
unless you're upping the price to make it worth their while. My developer once said, John, it has to be worth my while for me to sit there in all those hours of meetings of tile selection, everything.
Right.
They paid full ask for the one that I posted recently on Facebook.
Yeah.
Full ask because they knew that if we're going to offer all these different selections, that's what's going to take for our developer to be like, all right, well, at full ask, of course. What do you
That's
want?
the key in negotiations with anything, right? It's
Right.
setting up leverage. And I love the fact that you're talking about off the MLS. And I know that a lot of industry people hate that word off the MLS, but it's
It's
the
a
key
reality.
market in this, 2017. It's
Yeah.
like negotiations, you're only going to gain leverage by doing a pocket listing. You know, you have to know what's coming up on the market. And if somebody comes to me and wants to do an intake and do a consultation, buyer consultation, you have to understand what that buyer is looking for. And if that buyer is looking for something, they have that creative budget that I like to call, then you definitely want to, seek for opportunities outside the MLS. Because once it hits the MLS and it's that only one shiny penny, and I don't mean shiny penny when it comes to value and it's super cheap, because I think those days are gone.
Right.
It's more about like a property that's in the best location, in the zip code that you want it to be, near the public transportation that you want it to be, in the condition that you want it to be. Then forget about leveraging value or money. You have to leverage, being the first person there, the best, pre-approval letter,
Pre-approval,
making
very
sure you're
important.
working with the realtor that understands the market and it's going to understand how to negotiate and walk you through that process, because it's completely different than a normal deal. The developer is going to have the inside scoop of when that property goes into foreclosure or it's an estate sale or somebody wants to get it, right? They're not going to wait for that property to hit the market before they bid on it. So why should you wait till once it's rehabbed or it's built that it's going to hit the market, because then you're losing leverage as well.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're out with a buyer, I remember clearly we were driving around and there was, again, fence up, permit up, went over, took the number down. Didn't work for us, but at least the buyer was like, wow, he's being aggressive. He's not being lazy and just waiting for something to hit the
Exactly.
MLS. And that's important because, and then also on the flip side, on the list side of it, you want to get that exposure out for your client. Again, if the client's willing to understand that if we do like sell something, which we did, where we only had the foundation up, that you're going to be in with this buyer from start to finish.
Yeah.
So it all depends. There's so many variables. I mean, we could talk on this topic for hours.
And
Trim it down as much as we can and still have a bunch to say about it. So
no, I love
one
it.
thing
We
to
definitely
just
have to
add-
get you back here because we're ending the show. It's so much information to
done.
wrap up in like one segment, but you can always reach us and email us your questions at info@marketoverdrive.com. Javi, we didn't even get to the point.
I know. Make sure you
Oh,
secure your
financing.
financing. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the times with new construction, you're not going to be closing in 30 to 45 days. A lot of the times you are looking at extended close times. So, unfortunately, in certain cases, you are unable to actually secure your rate lock in certain situations. So always know that you always got to base your approval off of worst case scenarios in the event of market volatility, so that way you don't have a situation where you overbuy for something if there is a market increase in regards to interest rates.
Love
Give us a
it.
call at 312-738-6074. Javier Garcia, NMLS 217343.
John, your last words of wisdom for our audience. Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh,
on Market
thank you guys for
Overdrive.
having me back. I'd love to come back again soon, of course. My biggest advice is work. I said this in our last show last time, is work with professionals, work with people who do this full time, do this every day. They know what they're doing. Work with the right lender, work with the right attorney, work with the right agent, not with somebody who does not understand. Depending what you're going for, and obviously we're talking about new construction, ask your agent. Don't be shy. Have you had a new construction sale before? Have you negotiated one? Your lender, have you done one?
For
Your
sure.
attorney. Ask the questions. Don't be shy. And then don't be shy to, even though we talked about a lot of bidding and stuff, don't be shy to ask for what you want, but just make sure you itemize and prioritize what's important and what is not.
Get it in
Come
writing.
prepared.
Get it
Come
in
prepared.
writing for
Thank
sure.
you so much for tuning in and hanging out with us on Market Overdrive. We are your realtor, lender, specialist. If you have any questions, again, email us at info@marketoverdrive, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Ciao.
Bye, guys.